Hey guys, Jason Stallworth here with Metal Mastermind. Today we're talking about some different subgenres of metal music. What we're going to cover in this video is some different guitar techniques that are dominant in these particular subgenres of music. And of course, we'll talk about how we capture the overall feel of these subgenres as well. Now, the intent of this video is simply to help you expand. And this is perfect if A, you're wanting to write for a particular subgenre. Well, this video is going to give you some really good ideas to write your own riffs to cater to that subgenre. Or B, if you feel like you're writing the same riffs over and over again and you know you need to expand and branch out a little bit, well, this video is definitely going to help you do that. And at the end of the video, we'll share some additional metal songwriting resources with you, so make sure you hang around for that. Classic heavy metal. Now, before we get into the guitar techniques, and this is for all the subgenres that we cover, the techniques that we're talking about and the overall feel that we're going to go through here, it doesn't mean that the subgenre is limited to that. Just want to share that with you. Of course, the subgenres are much more expansive. We're just talking about some things that are common and some techniques you're definitely going to notice in each of these subgenres. That being said, classic heavy metal. We're going back to the old school Priest and Maiden and even the Black Sabbath days here. Now, what you're going to notice guitar-wise is there's, of course, a lot of power chords, a lot of down picking, and a lot of catchy single note riffs. And the reason I say catchy single note riffs, because these are memorable riffs that have been passed down to almost every hard rock and heavy metal guitar player. You go back to some of these classics and you learn those riffs. So if you're wanting to write more of a classic heavy metal style, the one thing that I would encourage you to do is focus maybe not so much on the most complicated riff, but something that's really catchy. Thrash metal. Now, we're going back to, well, the big four, of course, the Metallica, the Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, and of course, you've got other bands, awesome bands like Testament and Exodus and several more. This is sort of where metal became its next extreme, if you will. It was built on, of course, our classic heavy metal style, but they really took it to that next level. They made it more aggressive. So you've got the palm muting in there. You have a lot faster down picking in this style. Now you also have some alternate picking, quite a bit of fast alternate picking as well. You've got power chords going all over the place. And of course, you've got some fast riffing. So this kind of defines thrash metal. And if this is a style you're wanting to get into or wanting to integrate some of this into your writing, then yeah, you want to pick things up speed-wise a little bit, especially with the down picking, which of course James Hetfield was really known for that, as well as the other great musicians and guitarists from the thrash metal era. And of course, that's still going strong today. So think of speed if you're wanting to add these elements into your writing. And of course, feel free to add some alternate picking in there as well. Death metal. Now, we just talked about kind of how thrash metal was sort of that next extreme from the classic heavy metal. Well, I think this is another stepping stone of extreme music, going from the thrash style to the death metal style. And maybe we could go back to Venom. I mean, that's sort of black metal and death metal all in one there, and we're going to get to that subgenre as well, so hang around for that. But I'm also thinking, of course, bands like Cannibal Corpse, Obituary, just to name a few. And what you had here was a darker aggression. You know, you went from like heavy metal to thrash metal, thrash being a little bit more aggressive. Now you've got a much darker aggression here to the music. And everything we talked about in thrash metal applies to death metal, But the other extreme here is going to be the choice of notes. And of course, on top of that, the vocals play a huge role in this too, obviously. Now, think about this as you're writing. If your song or your riff, if you're thinking about having death metal vocals in that riff, think about how your guitar with this style is going to complement the vocals, and of course vice versa. So we're going for more than just the guitar part here. We're looking at the overall feel and of course the style of vocals that you're wanting as well. Melodic death metal. I figured we might as well cover this since we just covered death metal, and it's really kind of like a subgenre, if you will, sort of birthed from the death metal movement, but there are some other factors that make it, well, melodic death metal. Now I'm thinking about bands like Amon Amarth, Arch Enemy, of course there's several others, and I want to reiterate that the things that we talk about technique-wise and the overall feel, the subgenre is not limited to that. I'm just calling out some of the commonalities, some of the things that you're going to hear and probably notice when you're writing this style or listening to this style of music. So what we have is really every element of death metal. We've got a lot of alternate picking with this, a lot of fast alternate picking. You've got some obscure notes involved in that as well, but with melodic death metal, well, it's just that, it's melodic. So a lot of the guitar parts, or at least in parts of the songs, there's going to be a melody that the rhythm guitar is playing. And another thing I like about this is oftentimes you'll hear two guitars harmonizing with one another. So you'll have one guitar doing something, and then you'll have another guitar maybe playing the third note above that to harmonize. Now, of course, that's done in pretty much every subgenre of metal, but it's something that I notice a lot more in melodic death metal because it kind of gives that melody a little boost, if you will. So if you're writing this style of music, you've got the extreme vocals, you've got the death metal vocals, but you want more of a melodic death metal style, then what I want you to think about is, what is the guitar saying? Or what is the guitar singing? How are the rhythms going to captivate someone who is wanting to listen to that style, melodic death metal? I would say maybe think about the melody first and then think about the extreme side of the music, and I think that might help you marry the two together. Power metal. Now we're getting into what I consider a completely different subgenre of music than what we've covered up to this point. And there's one thing that's probably going to stand out more than anything. Now, bands, power metal bands, of course, most of us are probably thinking of Dragon Force. There's a local Florida band that I know, Seven Kingdoms. They're a great power metal band. I think Unleash the Archers is considered power metal, and of course there's several others. I think Edguy is one of the power metal bands. We could keep naming, right? So in any case, though, the thing you'll notice about power metal, for one, there are a lot of fast parts. There are a lot of fast riffs that are being alternate picked, whether it's a power chord or a single note riff. And there's a lot of times where you'll hold those power chords out and the double bass is going. But what really makes power metal different, and you'll hear this one thing, is you'll hear in some or many parts of power metal songs, it's in a major key. Most metal music we write in a minor key because that's darker, it's more aggressive, and it's more haunting, if you will. We're going to get into a haunting subgenre next, but it's just captivating you in a much different way than really any other genre of music. Power metal is a little bit different. Again, you're going to hear some major keys being played, but it's also more like an anthem. It's also more like a, I don't know, it's like you're marching towards battle, that kind of thing, if that makes sense. And you may also find the lyrics at times are more mystical. I know we didn't touch into vocals and lyrics and that sort of thing Of course, these are elements you do want to think about. Maybe we'll do another video on subgenres going a little bit deeper than just the guitar parts. But again, I think the major chords, the major progressions that you'll hear, especially in like the choruses because they're more anthem driven, that's a big thing that you'll notice in power metal. Black metal. No pun intended here, but this is where things get a bit darker. And we're thinking about bands like Dark Throne. We're thinking about Cradle of Filth. My good friend Ben Ash, he's part of a band now called Strigoi. And I will even talk about co-founder of Metal Mastermind, Ken Candelas. He has a project called Homeric, and it's more on the kind of the darker side of things, if you will, somatic horror. You could even lump it into black metal as well. And of course, I need to mention Venom. Many people will say that Venom was the first true black metal band. I know we talked about them earlier when we're talking about death metal, but the techniques involved in black metal, of course, we've covered these already. We're going back to the death metal style and even the melodic death metal style as well, where you've got a lot of alternate picking, which is also called at times, really fast tremolo picking. That right hand technique or picking hand technique, that's going pretty fast. You also have a deeper obscurity of notes involved in black metal. And we're talking about notes that wouldn't make sense to the normal listener or the normal musician that was not aware of this style of music, but it makes perfect and, I will say, beautiful sense to the black metal subgenre of music. So this is where you really have to get creative if you want to write this style of music, because you need to explore beyond what you're used to playing. You need to play notes that you were probably taught. If you had guitar lessons, you were probably taught, well, that note doesn't fit in this key, or it doesn't fit with this. Black metal really does a great job at breaking the rules, which in my opinion, there are zero rules in music. There is only what you want to write, and I encourage you to always hold on to that, hold true to that. But if you're writing this style, or if you want to integrate some of the black metal styles into your riffs, into your music, just don't be afraid to go outside the box, to color way outside of the lines, and that mindset will help you write that style much better. I want to also mention the different types of chords used in black metal. Again, it's the same concept. They're really coloring outside the lines when these artists write this style of music. The chords aren't going to sound normal. They're going to sound a lot darker, a lot more scary. I think black metal, I think it should scare you. It should just send chills up your spine a little bit when you're writing it. If it doesn't, keep trying. It will come. But just remember, deeper obscurity of notes. Symphonic metal. Now, of course, I'm thinking of bands like Nightwish, bands like Epica, bands like Delane, and of course the list goes on. This is a really cool subgenre to play, and what I'll say is because it's not guitar based, even though it's guitar based. I know that didn't make any sense, but here's the thing I want you to understand is with symphonic metal, there's orchestration involved. And we could even expand into some progressive metal bands, and we'll just kind of talk about that briefly here too. Bands like, of course, Dream Theater, right? Where they have keys. They have some sort of orchestration going on, so it's not just the guitar. And the reason why I say, well, it's not about guitar, but it is, because you have to be careful that the guitar fits the orchestration, that all that molds together and, well, sounds good in layman's terms. This can be a challenge for guitar players. Us guitar players, we want to be heard. We want our guitars to be front and center. And sometimes if you have a keyboard, and if you've ever played with a live band that has keys, you may look over and say, hey, your keyboard's too loud. Nobody can hear my guitar. Well, again, this is the beauty of symphonic metal, is really just kind of bringing all of that together so that it fits. So you have to think not just about the guitar, but you have to think more about the overall song, which I encourage you to do that anyway. Do what's best for the song. And I know you've probably heard that before. Of course, you've heard it on Metal Mastermind if you've been following us, or if you're part of one of our courses, you've heard us say that. Always do what's best for the song, not necessarily for, well, let's just say it, your ego. Well, symphonic metal will definitely break you from the ego, because again, you're going to be not competing with orchestration or a keyboard, but you're going to be writing with, you're going to be making those one, because that has to all come together. I mentioned Ken Candelas, the co-founder with me of Metal Mastermind, his project Homeric. Well, it has orchestration as well, and I'll tell you a very short story about that. I actually did the guitar parts for that album. Well, I had to base my guitar on his orchestration that he had already written for that. So that was quite challenging. There are a lot of parts where like, I can't really tell what he's playing here. It sounds really cool, but you've got layers of instruments in orchestration, aka in symphonic metal. So I just want you to think about that, and I would even say no matter what subgenre that you're wanting to write for or what you usually play, I would say try playing some symphonic metal. If you can have someone play a keyboard part, or if you've got like a virtual instrument keyboard and just throw a loop in your studio or something like that, and try to come up with a guitar part that fits that. Even if you never play that style or that subgenre, I think that can really expand your skill set as not only a guitar player, but also as a musician overall. Now, I know we spent some time on this subgenre, symphonic metal, but as far as guitar technique goes, it's pretty much everything we've talked about. I mean, different bands do different things. Going back to Nightwish, of course, there are a lot of songs that just have down picking in there. You've got an array of power chords because you're really going all over the place. If you've ever tried to play along with some of the complex Nightwish songs, and they can be complex, but if you're trying to play along with the orchestration, you're moving around quite a bit. Of course, there are single note riffs. Sometimes that fits better with the orchestration than a power chord. And of course, you've got some parts with some faster alternate picking as well, because symphonic metal can sometimes pick up, especially when the double bass gets going. So there are a lot of different elements in this subgenre of music. Doom metal. Now I'm thinking about bands like Candlemass, bands like Swallow the Sun, and this is a very interesting subgenre of metal. It's not so much guitar driven, even though the guitars are front and center. When I say guitar driven, it's not so much, I should say, technique driven. You're playing a lot of heavy chords and oftentimes to a slower BPM. So to many guitar players, that might not sound as challenging. Now, I'd beg to differ, because some of the doom metal bands, or the bands that have that style integrated into maybe some other styles, like my friend Ben Ash. He's with a band now called Strigoi. He used to play with Carcass back in the day. Strigoi mixes doom metal with some black metal and maybe a little death metal, so there's some more complexities in that. But overall, you're playing really a lot of heavy chords. Maybe you're down tuned or playing a 7-string. Now, of course, tunings and 6, 7, 8-string guitars, I mean, that can go across all subgenres of music. But I think with doom metal, you might be serving it better with some of those lower notes, because that's going to capture that feel. And the cool thing about this subgenre, it goes beyond just guitar technique. You're really serving the song when you play this style of music. You're an entity. That song is the entity, or that band that you're with. You guys are an entity, okay? And you want to capture the feeling. You want to give the listener that true feeling of doom metal. So it's not really highlighting any one instrument. It is really a true sense of togetherness, if that makes sense. So that's something to think about. Maybe you play thrash metal or death metal, but maybe you want to have one doom metal song on your album, or maybe you want to start a doom metal band. So these are just some things to think about as you're writing. 80s metal. Now, even though we're talking about a very specific era here, which kind of rolls into the early 90s as well, there's a wide range of types of bands, but there's some common techniques. So we're thinking about bands like maybe Motley Crue, Cinderella. That riff sort of sounded like a Cinderella riff there, right? We're thinking about bands like Dokken, and even some of the more progressive 80s metal bands like Queensryche. Of course, you've got a lot of downpicking here. You've got palm muting going on. You've got some single note riffs. One of the things, or I should say two things, that's really going to stand out in this style of metal, this subgenre, is going to be one, a lot of notes are played on the higher strings. This is something that kind of separates this style from some of the other styles of metal. Another thing you might notice is the often used variation of power chords. You heard that in the little riff I played in the beginning there, but that's something to think about if you're wanting to write more of that style. Think about playing not just the lowest notes on your guitar, but expand beyond that. Maybe play some stuff in A minor or D minor or something that's going to have you using some of those higher strings to capture that feel. We've got some other valuable resources in the description of this video. We've got some links to some other metal songwriting videos. We also have a link to our songwriting course called Metal Songwriters Forge. That course, we take you through not just the guitar parts. We go, of course, deeper into guitar parts and just to give you some ideas, but we also get into writing lyrics, writing vocal melodies. We also get into the bass parts of a song. We also get into drums, both real drums and programming drums, and even orchestration in that course. So again, that course is called Metal Songwriters Forge. And I just want to tell you real quick, this is not how to write a song or how you should or shouldn't do anything. That course is to serve you and to help bring out the creativity that's already within you, just like these videos are. We know the potential that you have, especially if you've watched the video this far into it. Thank you, by the way. Hey, give it a thumbs up if this helped, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. But just the fact that you've watched this far into the video, you have an immense amount of creativity already within you, and you're probably already doing some awesome things with that. Our job here at Metal Mastermind is just to help bring that out even more. So I hope we're doing that. And again, check out the links in the description of this video. We'll see you on the next video. As always, create your own sound.